Hey y'all, it's Robert from Laughing Willow Farms. Today I want to talk to you about something that we did this past year that helped us save on our energy bill massively. So this year in Texas we had two really big cold snaps, just temperatures that we don't normally have. Usually our winters are pretty mild. For the first one we were still installing the stove that you see behind me. For the second one we had it operating. And so our first bill, I get a weekly energy report of how much we're using from my energy company. And our first cold snap, where we were just using our normal heater, not the wood stove, our energy spiked by several $100s in 1 week. And I forget what the temperatures were, but regardless, once we had the stove installed for our next round of temperatures that were similar, our energy spiked about $15. So this thing is crazy efficient, and so I'm going to walk you through just a couple things that I didn't know. I had never used a wood stove before. I knew what they were, I knew they were efficient, and so I had to do a lot of research when installing it and setting it up and learning how to operate it. And there's a lot of videos that you can watch online that will help you do that, and I just want to give you a few newbie beginners tips that hopefully will help you when installing this, when figuring out what you want to buy, what type of wood to burn, just little things. And then you can go online and watch an actual instructional video that'll give you step-by-step instructions. But here's some things that helped me along the way. So this is the second stove that we bought. The first stove we bought, we found on Facebook Marketplace. It was in really good condition, really cool looking. It was an antique and weighed about 500 pounds, brought it home with the help of some friends, and set about looking up how to install it. And one thing to know if you buy an older stove is every stove is different as far as the requirements that they need for the hearth pad that they're on, the insulation that's needed around it, how much heat it puts out. There's just a lot of variables that go into that. I could not find that info on the stove that we had. And there were a lot of repairs that ended up needing to be done to it, so I actually turned around and flipped it for the same price that we bought for it. And then we put a little bit more money and just bought a brand new stove. The perk of a brand new stove is it's going to come with a user manual. Not only does it come with everything that you need already built into the stove, such as the fire brick and the insulation around the door and whatnot, but the user manual is huge because if you are building a hearth and everything, I built all this that you see behind me, if you're building that, you need to know the R ratings for all the materials that you're putting in, the insulation that you need between your walls and your fireplace and your floor and your fireplace. If you're on a concrete pad, you get a little bit of leeway, but we're in a pier and beam house with the wood floor, and I wanted to make sure that I built everything above what I actually needed to make sure that I'll never have any problems and whoever owns this home after me never has any problems. So a user manual is really huge. So that's what we did. I was able to follow that user manual for the hearth pad requirements, for what I needed on the walls behind me, for the stove pipe, for the chimney pipe, everything. It gave me pretty much all those requirements for this specific stove and the heat it puts out. Check your local codes for your city that you're in. There are specific requirements depending on where you are as to what you can and can't do, so make sure you check those out. Alright, now we're going to talk about stovepipe and chimney pipe. So inside your living space, you're going to have stovepipe, which is what is behind me. This pipe is going to be a little bit cheaper, and it's made to radiate heat out. The stovepipe is actually part of the source that heats your room. The fireplace does. The fan, which I'll talk about in a minute, if you can get one with the fan, is amazing. And then the actual pipe itself puts out heat as well. The chimney pipe is going to go above your ceiling in your attic and out through your roof. And that needs to be very well insulated. That is supposed to create a vacuum and take your air from your stovepipe and just get it out your roof safely through your attic. And there's a whole setup. We use the Duravent triple wall in our attic, and this is the Duravent double wall down here in our house. One last thing to mention about your stovepipe is that your stovepipe is something you're going to want to check when setting the position of your stove. on the clearance you need between the pipe and your wall. Because your stovepipe puts out so much heat, you're going to need to make sure that your wall is really well insulated, or that you have plenty of space between the pipe and your wall. And whether you get single wall or double wall stovepipe is going to kind of set the parameters on those clearances. And again, the manufacturer of your stovepipe will have that, or if you buy a new stove, your stove manual should have that as well. So now back to the topic of efficiency. I highly recommend that you get a stove that has a fan on it. So this room that I'm in is probably 25 by 25 or so. It's a mess, but I'll give you a little pan of the room. So this specific room that the stove is in, with the fan off, will be warm but manageable. You turn this fan even on medium, and it gets extremely warm. It's really efficient. Just plugs into the wall and has a little speed knob on the back of it. So next up is the hearth pad. I did quite a lot of research on this. It seems really basic now, but you have a few options for a hearth pad. If you're on a stone floor or a concrete floor, then you don't have quite as much to worry about with your stove. If you're on a wood floor like I am, you got a lot to worry about. You not only want to worry about like just immediate combustion, but long-term combustion. Like if your floor dries out from intense heat over a long period of time, then it can eventually like combust later on down the road. So do your research on this one. You can buy a hearth pad straight off Amazon, just like a ready-made, ready-to-go hearth pad. We chose to build this one. I used different types of cement board. I was very specific on what I bought and the R rating and how much of it I was using, and then we did brick on top of that. And again, I went a little bit over what I needed. This floor and the walls would get to about 100, 110 degrees when this thing's going full steam. A couple other gadgets that we got for our stove, just while we're at it, is a heat powered fan. You can get this off Amazon. It's all metal, just sits on your stove. And once the stove reaches a certain temperature, it just automatically turns on. If you're not somewhere where you have electricity, I installed a plug like in the wall here, but that will work. It doesn't work quite as well as the electric fan, but it does work. You're gonna want a stovepipe thermometer. You can get this off Amazon as well. This will kind of just help you keep your pipe in the efficient heating range and tell you if it gets too hot. And then wood stoves pull a whole lot of moisture out of your house, so you want to put that back in, especially during the winter time. So cast iron kettle, not to just promote Amazon, but that's where I got it. And you just put water in it and it puts moisture back in your room as the stove is doing this thing. Alright, so now for the stove itself. We got this off Northern Tool. It is the Vogelzang, all that info there model. It's awesome so far. We've used it for about 3/4 of the winter season this year. A few reasons I picked it are the space between the stove and the floor. I wanted extra of that. It has an ash unit right here with some extra ashes. This is your flue right here. And there we go. It's not huge. If you want something that you can just pack full of wood and walk away from for a really long time, you might want to go with a larger model. If you want something cost effective as your first stove to figure out what you're doing, this is a great model. It's important what kind of wood that you use. And you can find a list of good woods for a wood burning stove and then like best woods. I'll let you look that up. Don't ever put cedar in your wood burning stove. That's just something else to keep in mind, as well as the fact that you need seasoned wood along with that. So you're going to want, depending on the type of wood, it's going to need to sit for 6 months to up to 2 years. So if you're chopping your own wood, just keep that in mind. Or if you're buying it, just make sure you ask the right questions to make sure you're getting properly seasoned wood. So it's June in Texas, and I'm not going to fire this thing up to show you how she works. You'll just have to take my word for it, or you can watch her in action during one of the cold snaps that I mentioned that we had this year, and we'll link that video right here.